how did you get the job working at Lamborghini?
Because at that point, everybody who was good enough at selling cars had generally gone off to sell mortgages because it was a much better business in like 06, 07, 08. And it was so hard to sell the cars that they were just looking for anybody. And the fact that I had a little bit more of an understanding of the economics of ownership, as that was becoming a much bigger part of the ways that they were talking people through the deals, you really had to help them to understand how much this was going to cost them. There was no longer this fantasy of like endless demand and endless availability of funds, kind of a similar period to what we're having right now, where, in the wake of COVID, every new car sold out immediately. There was no inventory, cheap cars, expensive cars, whatever. And so we were kind of in this moment, much like now, where you really had to sell the car. And I loved that. I loved working deals and negotiating and trying to help listen and understand what a buyer wanted and fitting that into the logic I needed them to accept in order to make the decision to buy what I had.
And what are the finances behind selling vehicles? I feel like there are a lot of things that people think happen but don't actually happen. I could be completely wrong here, but I feel like the sales rep always goes, they talk to the seller. They have a base price that they can sell it at. They're making a little bit on the spread, but they can also sell it as high as they want. And then they take that, the larger portion of fat, if there's, more meat on the bone in the deal.
Yeah, so there's a ton of different pay plans in car dealerships. For us, it was a 25% commission of the gross profit. We didn't get paid anything on the back end of the finance reserve and stuff like that, because there's obviously dozens and dozens of ways that a car dealer can make money in a transaction. But, that spread between wholesale and retail is going to create this theoretical margin that you could have, and you want to retain as much gross profit as you can as a salesperson because you're making a big percentage of that. It's very different than a real estate agent that's getting paid a percentage of the entire transaction value. So a real estate agent really doesn't care how much they sell your house for. They just want more deals, because the difference in their commission of if they sell it for your asking price or 85% of that is not that big of a difference. And so they just want an easy deal that gets done fast. They're not that heavily incentivized to maximize your selling price. And so in the car business, that matters a good bit more because you're getting paid lower dollar figures and it's being calculated of different values. So, we would probably average about 6 to 8% as a gross margin. And the dealership would a successful exotic car dealership is usually operating on a 1 to 3% net margin after everybody's paid out. So they flow an insane amount of cash because the dollar amounts are so high, but they're really not wildly profitable. And it's very easy for them to take massive, massive lumps. And so when I joined the dealership, we would look at some of these deals that they'd done in the prior year, and they were losing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a car because the market had shifted so abruptly in the early days of the recession that there was just nothing they could do. And there were some unscrupulous and untoward things that had happened with the dealership in the year prior, of people that were trying to steal money and bury too much money in inventory and stuff like that. And so that had exaggerated the problem to some extent. But usually there's going to be some kind of a cap. It's because if you can make a lot more than $10,000 or $20,000 on a car, that's really because of the way the dealership works and the opportunity that exists in the car being available to the market, more so than your work as a salesperson. And so our cap was $4,000 a car. And usually dealerships have what's called PAC, meaning this is a non-commissionable portion of a profit that is assigned as a cost to any car. In our case, it was about $750. And so I would always pencil the deals to make $16,750 because that was me getting every dollar, and there were no non-commissionable dollars in this transaction. And they didn't love that, but nobody else was creating these margins. And so I would sell usually anywhere from, 8 to 15 cars a month. And you don't max it out all that often, but I think my best month ever was about 50 grand, and probably my best year ever was about 350. And at the time, really I don't know anybody at that point, before 2015, that was making more than me selling exotic cars. There might have been some small-time brokers that were just doing these massive deals or stuff like that. But that was obviously massively more money than I ever thought I'd make in my life. And so it was a very wild time.
So who's buying Lamborghinis? What type of person walks in?
Well, there was always that stereotype of the Miami Vice chest hair and pet alligator and a white blazer. And I guess my top buttons don't tend to work as well as they should. And I do have a pet boa constrictor, but that's not as accurate as it seems like. But I would say that really it was small to medium-sized business owners that had grown up dreaming about the cars and weren't really sure what it took to afford them. I loved people that were financing cars because they traded a lot more often, and it was a lot easier for them to accept a few $100 more a month in their payment than having to pay a huge delta when they would try to upgrade to the next thing. So I gravitated towards people that were very aspirational and didn't mind massive car loans, a lot like myself, because I could speak with a lot of authority to that. And you don't necessarily want to always think of you're selling to your peers or you're trying to be equal to your customer. But, like I did a sales training thing with an Audi dealership last week where, they were really worried about, as the cars got so much more expensive, just what they would say. And I'm like, look, they don't want you to be equal, but they do want you to be the expert on this knowledge gap that they have as they're honestly coming to a dealership trying to get advice. And so, I learned everything there was to know about exotic car financing. I knew everything there was to know about the product. And so they were never going to run into someone who was more equipped to help them through the transaction that they wanted to do. After I left the dealership, it seemed like every life insurance company wants a retired car salesman or no longer selling cars, car salesman to come and sell their stuff. And I'm like, man, I get it. And I know everybody needs life insurance, but I've been selling stuff that people really, really want, but know they don't need. And you want me to sell something that people know they probably need, but they really don't want to deal with. And I'm not sure that's the sales paradigm shift that I'm really looking for right now. But yeah, I mean, that was really it, is guys that, have made their own money and want to go out and have this trophy and have this experience. And I always wanted them to go drive them as much as possible because that was always my personal mindset. But yeah.
Although really quick, before we go into that, even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars, molecular medicine, to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast.
But of course, the problem is that AI requires a ton of speed and computing power, so how can you compete without costs spiraling out of control?
That's why it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or our sponsor, OCI.
OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all of your AI and machine learning workloads.
OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking, so you're saving a ton of money. Not to mention, thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including MGM Resorts, Specialized Bikes, and Fireworks AI. And right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half when you move to OCI. This is for new US customers with minimum financial commitment, and the offer ends December 31st, 2024. So see if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/iced. Again, that's oracle.com/iced with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, Oracle, for sponsoring this podcast. And now let's get back to the episode.